Okay. Our next question, and some of this I think you've probably alluded to, but I do want to ask this question because it was the first one that came in. What do you feel are the two biggest issues facing Palo Alto, and why? And we'll begin with you, Ms. Shepard.
Well, I've always talked about four things, which is traffic, parking, and density, and then also the community conversation, and maybe five, the comprehensive plan update. So I'm going to start with comprehensive plan update because I think that's the most challenging and the most important, because there's a lot of angst about how what's going on right now, and most of the projects that are in play right now and getting developed right now are under conforming zoning as the comprehensive plan is articulated back in 1998. And so I hear from many that this is not the experience we want in this community, to have, little units that have been, little shops out on El Camino turn into 3-story projects. And so getting to the comprehensive plan and getting scenarios into the comprehensive plan and revisioning, and then going out into the community to find our vision, and then also to do the measurements in the environmental impact report, which does give us the updated traffic studies and all that many people have been really interested in.
Thank you. Mr. Scharf.
Well, I think it's traffic, parking, and density, and trust in the development process. I've watched over the years when we talked about the PC process, we talked about how it needed to be reformed. We frankly ensured when we looked at the PC processes on council that there would actually be real benefits. But I do not see how the PC process continues as a viable alternative when there's no trust in it. And so therefore I think we need to eliminate it. I think everybody feels that there's this sense that with a PC process, there's either an exception, that someone's getting a deal that they shouldn't get. So I think we just simply need to eliminate it, and we need to focus on fixing our traffic, parking, and frankly supporting our retail and enhancing retail downtown and other places in the city.
Thank you. Mr. Weiss.
I'm going to follow Nancy's suit. I think this comprehensive plan, general plan update is a very serious matter. I'm actually quite concerned. And then piggyback to that is what I feel is a general, not to be Jeremiah, but a general leadership problem, and there's a vacuum and a special interest has crept in. The comprehensive plan is a good plan. We want to ratify it and carry it on, carry it over. We don't want to gut it. Why did we spend $1.7 million for a consultant in Berkeley to basically gut it and flush it into the bay, as I say in my ballot pamphlet statement? I disagree with Corey. I think our Palo Alto was a sham and a boondoggle. We spent $350,000 on designer cheeses and juices just to lure people in. I mean, I do think, following George Packer's recent book, The Unwinding, I think we need to all lean in, step forward, speak out. I don't think we need to be lured by fancy cheeses, but thank you all for coming tonight, and I look forward to working with everyone in this room towards making Palo Alto great and keeping it the way it has been.
Thank you.
Order, can I respond to the critique?
Not at this time. In your closing statement, you could certainly address that. Ms. Holman.
Yes, thank you. I think there are two issues that I would focus on. One is development. And why is that an issue? It's because of how much, what kind, and where. We're being impacted by new development as it is changing the character of town and the pace at which it is coming. And it also is displacing our local services and retailers. And I think that's a very serious implication for our community, both economically. From my planning background, I know that economically it is important to have local independent businesses as well as the community character. And the other one I would say is budget. Because from my perspective, how we spend our dollars should be determined by our values. So our values should drive how we spend our dollars as opposed to the other way around. And one example I would give with that is, before the downturn, the most recent downturn, we were close to 1% of our budget was spent for our social services to support those who are less well off in this community. And the downtown food closet almost closed. And so I would like to get it back up to that.
Thank you. Ms. Koo?
Two biggest issues, changing culture and values at City Hall so that it does bring back the vision of the people, of the residents, back into City Hall. And growth Growth is actually now determined by regional forces, Sacramento, and developers and special interests. That needs to be addressed and skeptically looked at and moderated. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Wolbach?
I'd say that the two biggest issues facing our community, one is style, one is substance. On style, it's how we interact with each other. It's the missing civility and openness, of which, again, I think that our Palo Alto was a baby step in the right direction, though certainly inadequate. I was at a couple of those meetings, and more needed to follow, for sure. On the substance of policy, it's really our jobs housing imbalance and our failure to address it. Not because ABAG tells us, but because we have a jobs housing imbalance. It's worsening traffic, it's worsening parking, and it's squeezing people out of Palo Alto. It's squeezing local businesses out of Palo Alto, because what we're facing is skyrocketing property values. And that's great for all of us who own homes. I'd like to say I was endorsed by the Silicon Valley Association of Realtors. I'm not trying to drive down everybody's property values, but let's be honest, it's getting to a point where people are getting pushed out.
Thank you. Mr. Frederick?
Was the question the two biggest priorities? Was that?
Yes, it was. Let me take a look at it. The two biggest issues facing Palo Alto and why.
Okay. Well, I do think the number one issue is how we prioritize things. I think, I read a thing today somebody sent me about Vince Lombardi, famously quoted as, winning is the only thing, that type of thing. But they said Lombardi's actual approach to things was focus on the task and then develop relationships between the players. And I see the gap in both of those areas is immense. And we have to square up over the issue of cumulative impacts and also, what is the real nature of declaring a negative environmental impact? We have absorbed huge environmental impacts with scarcely a cry from our political leaders because it's acceptable zoning is given the excuse. So I think we need to sort of change our focus and attitude.
Thank you. Mr. Johnston?
I agree with the others who have pointed to the comprehensive plan as the number one priority. I think the comprehensive plan is our blueprint. It's the blueprint for how we want our community to look for the next 5, 10, 15 years. It's critically important that all of you, everyone in the community, but all of you, provide input into that so that your voices are heard and that you will be able to help the city determine where things are going to be. And I think we need an overall plan before we start doing changes to spot zoning or to changes to the PC process so that we kind of know what the overall picture is going to be before we start looking at little pieces. My second priority would be to improve transparency and access from our leaders. We need to reach out to the community, make sure that their voices are heard before we make large decisions at City Hall.
Thank you. Mr. Reddy?
I see our biggest problem is traffic. It takes 40 minutes to get through one end to the other end. It's worse on the south side. North side is a little easier. So we need to come up with an innovative way to address the traffic. As much as when I go to London, I see Tube. Maybe Elon Musk could help us design a very innovative way to move us around without cars. We need to get past the gasoline cars and the one person driving, all that stuff. So we need to be very innovative, and we could be that. The second one is basically no growth, slow growth, low growth, no growth. We want Palo Alto to be just like it is. Don't mess it up. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Douglas?
I'm going to say it again. Homelessness. Okay? That's a big issue as far as I'm concerned. 6 people died on the street last bad wet season. I certainly don't want to see that again. I want to see people housed if possible, housing first, and nobody dying on the street. There's a goal worth seeking. And the other one is probably related, and that's affordable housing. Even young people like Corey have talked about how difficult it is for someone his age to find a place to buy. In fact, finding a place to rent is getting to be harder. I want to stick to my mortgage because it's way cheaper than any other place I could rent in this town. And if that raises the evil specter of rent control, let's not rule it out. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Filsa?
Well, I think the most critical and important problem is development and land use reform in the city. I think it's so big that it touches immense numbers of things. It touches everything in this town. I think PC reform is just a little tiny piece of this. If you look at our city in the last 4 years, we've opened more office space in the downtown core than in the previous 20 years combined. We now have the county's worst jobs housing imbalance and its worst inbound commutes. And it's a function of a number of things, but our development processes and policies have led directly to this, and I think we got to change that right away. I think that it can't wait for a rewrite of the comprehensive plan. I think we need to act now. I actually think the current comprehensive plan is quite good, and with only minor changes will last us another 20 years. But if we don't act faster than that, California Avenue is going to look like University Avenue. It already sort of is starting to go that way. You know, Midtown's going to be behind that. We need to start making choices like this if we want to have a direction of what our town's going to look like. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Du Bois?
So agree with Eric. I think the number one issue is land use policy. I think traffic and parking are just symptoms of that. We need to stop digging ourselves into a bigger hole. We need to stop granting exceptions for commercial office buildings. And the second thing would be, I do think we need a change of culture. It comes from the city council setting priorities. I think the city manager and the staff will then react to that. So I'd really like to see a culture that is more responsive to residents, and then also just sets clarity. I think developers and residents alike would both benefit from just some simple clarity. Thanks.
Thank you.